Now, trains, buses and tube services were ramped up today as the capital starts to ease out of the strictest lockdown measures. Official advice remains to avoid public transport if possible and to adhere to social distancing rules if you do travel. While figures showed an increase in passenger numbers, the network was still far from busy. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has more.
This was the rush hour in a parallel universe. The Underground is known as a mass transit system, but today the masses were told to stay away, and they did, which was a relief for those who had to travel, like nurse Anu Pillai on her way home from the night shift in a critical care unit at a London hospital.
Looking at the present environment we are in, I think we are very safe at the minute. If we prevail this distancing, it's going to be very safe.
There were more trains than a week ago, but still not the full service. There were more passengers, an increase of 18% on last Monday, but not enough to cause overcrowding. And some people felt relaxed enough to disregard the advice to wear a mask.
There's been a big improvement from today to last week. More and more people, I'm told, are wearing non-medical facial coverings, but it's a message to all Londoners or those coming into our city. Please, you wearing a non-medical facial covering makes other people safer.
Some main roads felt busier despite the return of the congestion charge in the ultra-low emission zone. This was the highway in East London. But the Mayor's new pop-up bike lane on Park Lane wasn't doing much trade, which didn't come as a surprise to London's cabbies.
Very few people cycle down Park Lane anyway. They go through the park, which is next to it, which is the sensible thing to do. If you're on a bike, you ride through the park. I think the Park Lane one is absolutely going to be a white elephant 24 hours a day.
As people start discovering it, they're going to use it. The brilliant thing about the Park Lane pop-up route is that it takes the pressure off the walking route just inside the park. So rather than conflicting with the cyclists and pedestrians, you get a lot more space for everyone.
So it's not a white elephant?
No.
On the railways, there were more than a few ghost trains, like this Thameslink service, where you could walk from carriage to carriage without seeing anyone. Even on the busiest trains, there weren't enough passengers to cause alarm.
People are keeping to 2 metre distance, sort of a bay each.
It actually feels as if there's less people because there's more trains.
No one sat next to each other, people are wearing masks. Yeah, it's all good.
Commuters famously don't talk to one another. Now they're not supposed to sit next to each other. There is one part of the public transport system in London where social distancing shouldn't be a problem. The cable car over the Thames, where passengers can have a gondola all to themselves. The Emirates airline was one of the early casualties of the virus. Today it reopened. Not that many people appeared to be using it. At least some things are back to normal. Simon Harris, ITV News, Silvertown.
Next tonight, TfL has been told it must start charging for buses after weeks of free travel throughout the capital. Passengers haven't had to pay for journeys since London went into lockdown. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris is in Fulham this evening. Simon, why is this changing now?
Lucrezia, it's a sign of the times that this normally busy bus stop is as quiet as it is. But coronavirus has had another impact on the buses. 29 drivers in London have died. Last month, TfL banned passengers from using the front door after pressure from the drivers' union. That meant passengers no longer walked past the driver's cab, but it also meant they could no longer tap the card reader. And TfL is in financial trouble. That effectively made bus travel in London free. Last week, the government agreed a £1.6 billion bailout for TfL, but it's now emerged that one condition is that TfL must start collecting fares again. And not surprisingly, drivers are apprehensive.
We're hoping that the front doors don't reopen because at the moment we don't feel, with the current situation, with the number of people dying, we're sadly still losing bus drivers in London. We don't feel that opening doors will be appropriate.
The return to normal fares is likely to start being phased in on some routes from Saturday. And to begin with, it'll be on the new route masters, the so-called Boris buses, because they already have a card reader at every door. And it may be that TfL now has to adapt all the other buses to move the card readers next to the middle door. We're likely to get more details from TfL about how this is going to work later this week.
All right, Simon, thank you. Good evening. The message from the Tourist Board was don't visit Southend, but on the hottest day of the year so far, thousands did exactly that and headed straight for the beach. Some groups travelled from as far away as Manchester and Leicester No cafes were open, no shops, but that didn't deter people intent on enjoying a day at the seaside after weeks of lockdown. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris is there for us this evening. And Simon, it still looks pretty busy there.
Lucrezia, the tide has gone out here at Southend, and while the beach is now quieter than it was earlier, there is still plenty of people enjoying the warm evening sunshine. If you've got time on your hands, and you're allowed to, which we are all now allowed to do, who wouldn't want to be beside the seaside on a day like this? From what I could see, many people tried their best to obey the social distancing rules, but at times it wasn't that easy. A heatwave after 8 weeks of lockdown was always going to be an explosive mix, and on Southend Beach the inevitable happened. Thousands of sunseekers came from far and wide, taking advantage of the new rules allowing travel. As the temperature rose, the seafront got more and more crowded.
We've come from Hertfordshire, and I don't know, I was just, obviously with the lockdown, we've just been stuck in the garden, so I thought it's a bit of change of scenery for them.
I'm from Manchester and it's nicer than Blackpool. I came from Leicester and I came here because it's the sea and I love the sea and I like to take the energy from it, you see, yeah.
During lockdown, the resort adopted a new marketing slogan, "Don't visit Southend." No one here was taking much notice of it today. It's the middle of the day in the middle of the week, yet looking at the beach, you could be forgiven for thinking it was a bank holiday Monday with lockdown a distant memory. The town's council said there was nothing it could do to stop the flood of visitors other than appeal to people to keep their distance.
If it becomes dangerous, we will have to close the seafront, but that would be a last resort. We'd only close it, it wouldn't stop people coming, we'd close it to traffic so that people can move around safely.
Lockdown has dealt a heavy blow to Southend's traditional seaside businesses. Amusement arcades, shops and cafes have missed the start of the season and are still closed. Adventure Island, Southend's biggest attraction, is out of bounds. The owner, who also runs the town's aquarium, as well as cafes and bars, would normally expect to have 1,000 employees at this time of year. Instead, there are just 30.
If it was up to me now, I'd just reopen the country. That's what I have to say that as a businessman, because you know we work long and hard to build our businesses, and we're just seeing them all just go down the sink.
But Mark Johnson is back in business, hiring deck chairs. He opened again on Sunday.
99% of people were being sensible, keeping their distance. You know, we personally offered, we wash the deck chairs down with the sanitisers, and every time they're used, we've got our gloves, and we wash our hands all the time. We ask the public to wash their hands as well, which most of them are, not all, but yeah, and the majority of people are distancing themselves pretty sensibly.
Many people on the beach did their best to observe social distancing. To begin with, 2-metre gaps weren't a problem, but as the shingle got busier and busier, staying apart became increasingly challenging. Well, we're now heading for a bank holiday weekend, and the council has adopted what it calls mitigation measures to try to keep people safe, but it's going to be another test this weekend. Mitigation measures include wider pavements, portable toilets with a one-way queuing system and hand sanitizer. But at the end of the day, the council admits, despite the "Don't Visit Southend" slogan, it has no power to stop people coming to what was, after all, always the East End's favourite seaside resort.
Simon from the beach in Southend, thank you.
Good evening. For the last 2 months, London's hospitals and those who work in them have been under extreme pressure, fighting a disease no one's ever seen before. Almost 6,000 people have died. But the latest figures available to us show that in a single day, no lives were lost to the virus in most of London's hospitals. We are, of course, far from the end of this crisis, and doctors have warned tonight that measures to contain the virus must continue. But after weeks of recording the devastation caused by the outbreak, these numbers look like progress. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
No London hospital has been immune from the tragedy of coronavirus. Some have felt its effects far worse than others. The Royal Free Hospital Trust, one of London's largest, has seen 478 deaths. But even here, there was a day last week when no one died from COVID-19. A day when 2/3 of London's NHS trusts reported no deaths.
This is good news, but we've got to realise the virus is still out there. What this shouldn't be is lead us to complacency, which could lead to a second wave that overwhelms the NHS.
The virus has taken a heavy toll on the capital. 5,838 Londoners have died in hospital. But the most up-to-date verified figures show that in 21 out of the 30 NHS trusts, there were no deaths recorded on May the 15th. For health workers on the front line, it's encouraging but not conclusive.
Of course, this relates to the lockdown figures, not to where we are now. We'll only know that data in another week to 3.
It's 3 weeks since the Prime Minister declared the outbreak had peaked. In London, the death toll, hospital admissions and new infections are falling. Londoners have been taking advantage of the freedom to sunbathe and travel, some more relaxed, some still wary.
This is the first time I've actually got on a bus and come this distance, so yes, I feel confident.
I'm still worried to a certain extent, and I think, but feel a lot less worried than I did 5-6 weeks ago.
It's still there, so we should still be cautious, and still not be reckless at all.
In Southend, the beach was again busy today. Families did their best to stay 2 metres apart. Police patrolled the shingle to encourage social distancing. Despite the falling death toll in our hospitals, the danger is far from over. Simon Harris, ITV News.